Hi, my name's Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at Trillium. I had a pastor friend of mine. He had an idea for the church. He wanted to bring some change to the church. Not huge change, but significant change to his congregation. So he went to his board with a proposal. He explained to them the backstory of the issue. He laid out the proposal to deal with the issue or problem, and then he explained what he thought the effect would be. It took him about 10 minutes, and when he was done, he looked around the board and he realized that he was alone in his presentation. That no one around the board was really agreeing with him. And he was really perplexed by that. So he went away and he thought about it, and he came to the realization that he simply hadn't explained it very well. He mustn't have done a really good job preparing it, and he didn't lay it out in a very clear manner. So at the next board meeting, he did a much more comprehensive presentation, much more detail in the back story, explanation. He offered more concrete explanation around the proposal and more detailed expectation of the effect of the change. And when he was done, he looked around the board room and he realized that he was still alone. And he was now really perplexed. How could his board members not see what he sees? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you find yourself alone and you're kind of perplexed by it? How did you get into this situation in life and you're on your own? Last week we talked about communication, how we listen, but we listen to respond. That is, we hear what other people are saying, but we're more caught up, our attention's more caught up in what we're going to respond with than we are in what's being communicated to us. And because of that, we miss out on critical communication from others. And inevitably, we find ourselves alone. And that breakdown of communication can literally make us alone. We end up in broken marriages, schismed families. We end up being dismissed from work. And I think at the root of it all is that we aren't listening so well. We might be listening to respond, but we're not listening so well. The Bible story is that human aloneness, that the aloneness in life comes to us because we have severed our communication with God. The whole Bible, the 1,000+ pages of the Old Testament, is really a simple story of how a blessed and gifted people who had cried out to God for freedom and liberation, called Israel, who were living in Egypt in slavery and bondage, God heard their cries, rescued them, replanted them in a better place, set them up for this wonderful communication with their Creator, and how in the end, over decades and centuries, this communication fails, and they find themselves alone again, with all the consequences that come from that. Psalm 81 is a beautiful, simple psalm that lays out this big story in such simple terms. And in the middle of the psalm, God cries out in despair that his people no longer listen to him. And for that reason, God says, I let go of the reins and let the people do it their way. And their way is to end in ruin. The kingdom is shattered, the people are dispersed. The great vision for Israel to be the light to the world has come to an end. And in fact, the Old Testament is trying to figure out, how did this happen? How does it happen in a big way, but how does it happen in our own personal lives? How do we end up on the outs with so many people so often? Especially in those relationships that we want the connection. When we get married, there's so much potential in our marriages. And whether we stay together or not, so often we are disappointed by them because they don't fulfill themselves in the way that we had hoped. Or in our parent-child relationships, whatever side we're on, they have so much potential, and yet so often they never go to the place that we hope. Or our relationships with our family members or work colleagues. And often we find ourselves alone in life, isolated. And it's always because, I think, in the end, the communication didn't take hold. And that we're caught up in listening to respond. And the call of the gospel that Jesus brings to us is to learn again how to listen. How to listen to God and how to listen to our neighbor. That pastor friend of mine, I think what he needs to do is not present another proposal to his church board. He needs to sit down and listen to them. Listen. Not listen to respond, but listen. Hear their hearts, hear their voices, hear their yearnings. For in that communication lies their destiny and their future.